They say marriage is a risky investment, but I never imagined I was merely collateral in my husband's gamble. I walked into his skyscraper to surprise him, only to face a truth colder than a Chicago winter. To his staff, I was a ghost. His real wife had just left with him to plan their wedding. But this was not just an affair. It was a perfect crime. And it was signed with my name. My name is Faith Treadwell. At 32 years old, I possessed a portfolio that would have made any senior partner at a top-tier architecture firm weep with envy. I had an eye for negative space that my professors at Yale once called prodigious, and a knack for structural integrity that bordered on intuitive. I could look at a dilapidated warehouse and see a thriving community center. I could look at a barren plot of land and envision a sustainable sanctuary. But for the last 4 years, the only thing I had been building was the ego of my husband, Julian Thorne. I had effectively retired from the world of competitive design to become the invisible scaffolding behind Ethelgard Dynamics. Julian was the visionary, the face on the cover of Forbes, the man who promised to revolutionize global logistics through AI-driven supply chains. I was the one who proofread his speeches until 2 a.m, the one who designed the layout of his home office to maximize his productivity, and the one who dimmed my own light so his could burn a little brighter. I told myself this was a partnership. I told myself that his victory was our victory. Our life in Chicago certainly looked like a victory from the outside. We lived in a penthouse on the 45th floor that offered a panoramic view of Lake Michigan. On clear days, the water looked like a sheet of hammered turquoise, beautiful and cold. The apartment was a masterpiece of modern minimalism by design. Naturally. It featured Italian marble floors that cost more than my parents' first house, bespoke furniture imported from Milan, and a silence so profound it sometimes felt like pressure building in my ears. It was a museum, not a home, but it was the stage Julian needed to play the part of the billionaire genius. Julian was always busy. That was the mantra of our marriage. He was building an empire, after all. His schedule was a fortress of meetings, international calls, and crisis management sessions. I respected it. I defended it. When my friends asked why Julian missed another dinner party, or why he was working through Christmas Eve, I would smile that practiced, supportive smile and explain the burden of heavy leadership. I believed in his work. I believed in his stress. I believed in him with a naivety that now seems almost criminal. That morning, the city was bathed in a crisp, golden light. It was a significant date, though not one marked on any public calendar. It was the 5th anniversary of the day Julian first incorporated Ethelgard Dynamics. Back when it was just a terrifying idea and a stack of maxed-out credit cards, I wanted to celebrate him. I wanted to remind him that I had been there since the beginning, before the private jets and the magazine covers. For months, Julian had kept me away from the new company headquarters in the Loop. "It is a construction zone, Faith," he would say, kissing me on the forehead with a patronizing tenderness. "Wires everywhere, drywall dust, union disputes. It is no place for you yet. Wait until the grand opening. I want it to be perfect for you." I had waited, but today felt different. I had seen a news alert that morning that Ethelgard had secured a massive government contract. Securing the company's future for the next decade, he had done it. The construction excuses surely did not apply on a day of such triumph. I decided to break the rules. I wanted to see him in his element, to be the first to hug him when the news broke. I dressed with intention. I chose a cream-colored cashmere coat that softened the sharp angles of the windy city morning, and a pair of heels that clicked with authority against the pavement. In my purse, tucked safely inside a soft velvet pouch, was my gift. It was not something new or flashy. It was my grandfather's Patek Philippe, a watch manufactured in 1952. It had a leather strap worn soft by time, and a face that had seen the rise and fall of industries. It was a symbol of endurance, of legacy. It was the most precious thing I owned, and I was going to wrap it around Julian's wrist to remind him that time was the only true currency. The drive to the financial district was short. I parked my car in the adjacent garage and walked toward the building that housed Ethelgard Dynamics. It was a monolith of black glass and steel, piercing the sky like a jagged shard of obsidian. It was intimidating, aggressive, and undeniably impressive. My heart swelled with a foolish pride. My husband built this, I thought. I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped into the lobby. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of ozone and expensive cologne. The space was cavernous, designed to make anyone entering feel small, insignificant. The walls were lined with abstract art that looked like violent slashes of paint on canvas. Across the expanse of polished granite floor stood the reception desk, a curved fortress of white stone manned by a single gatekeeper. The receptionist was young, perhaps 24 or 25. She was strikingly beautiful in a sharp, synthetic way. Her hair was pulled back into a severe bun. Her makeup was flawless, and she typed on her keyboard with manicured nails that clicked like hail on a tin roof. She did not look up as I approached. "Excuse me," I said, projecting the warm, confident voice I used to use when presenting blueprints to skeptical clients. She stopped typing and raised her eyes. They were cool, assessing, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Can I help you?" "I am here to see Julian Thorne," I said, smiling. "I know I do not have an appointment, but I am hoping to surprise him. It is a special occasion." The young woman sighed, a microscopic puff of air that conveyed a galaxy of annoyance. "Mr. Thorne is extremely busy today. Unless you are on the authorized visitor list, I cannot let you up. Security protocols." "I understand," I said, keeping my tone light, "but I think he will make an exception for me. I am his wife." I waited for the shift. I waited for the mask of indifference to crack, for her eyes to widen in recognition, for the sudden scramble to be helpful. That was how it usually went when people realized who I was. But the shift did not happen. Instead, the receptionist frowned. It was a genuine expression of confusion, not deference. She tilted her head slightly, looking at me with a mixture of puzzlement and something that looked uncomfortably like pity. "I am sorry," she said slowly, as if speaking to someone who had trouble understanding the language. "Who did you say you were?" "Faith," I said, the smile starting to feel stiff on my face. "Faith Thorne, Julian's wife." The receptionist stared at me for a long, uncomfortable silence. She looked down at her screen, tapped a few keys, and then looked back at me. The pity in her eyes deepened. It was not the pity you give to a VIP who has lost their way. It was the pity you give to a madwoman shouting at a lamppost. "Ma'am," she said, her voice dropping a decibel, becoming soft and patronizing. "I think there has been some mistake. Mrs. Thorne is already here. In fact, she just left with Mr. Thorne about 15 minutes ago." The words hit me like physical blows. 1, 2, 3, Mrs. Thorne is already here. My brain simply refused to process the data. It was like trying to load a complex 3D render on a computer from 1995. It just crashed. I stood there, clutching my purse, the velvet box inside suddenly feeling heavy as a brick. "That is impossible," I said. My voice sounded thin, reedy. "I am Faith Thorne. I am his wife. You must have seen his mother, or perhaps his sister." "Elena. She is in town." I was grasping at straws, desperate to construct a reality where this made sense. Julian's mother was in Florida. Elena was in London, but I needed a logical explanation. I needed the world to stop tilting on its axis. The receptionist shook her head. She leaned forward slightly, her expression softening into a tragic kindness that was worse than her previous coldness. "No, ma'am," she said gently. "It was not his mother. It was his fiancée. Well, his wife, practically. They are getting married next month." They left early specifically to go to a tasting for the wedding menu. "The ceremony is in Paris at the Ritz." She phrased it as a question, as if trying to jog my memory, as if checking to see if I was perhaps the wedding planner or a confused caterer who had mixed up the dates. Paris, the Ritz, next month. The lobby went silent. The clicking of her nails had stopped. The hum of the HVAC system seemed to vanish. All I could hear was the rushing of blood in my ears, a roar like a waterfall. Wedding. Julian and I had been married for 4 years. We had married at the courthouse because he said he wanted to save money for the company. He said he did not believe in big, flashy ceremonies. He said our love was private, sacred, and did not need an audience. I had agreed. I had worn a simple white dress from a department store, and we had eaten dinner at a local steakhouse afterward. I had thought it was romantic. I had thought it was sensible. Are you the event coordinator?" the receptionist asked, her voice breaking through the static in my head. "Did you miss the meeting time?" I stepped back. I could not breathe. The air in the lobby had turned into solid glass. I needed to get out. I needed to see the sky. I have to go," I whispered. I turned and walked toward the revolving doors. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. They were numb, mechanical. I pushed through the glass and spilled out onto the sidewalk. The wind off the lake hit me, biting and cold, but I barely felt it. A sleek black car was idling at the curb just a few yards away. It was a Maybach, long and imposing, shining like a dark jewel under the city sun. I knew that car. Julian had shown me brochures for it. Laughing about how it cost more than most people earned in a decade, he said he would never buy one, that it was too ostentatious, but there it was, and the rear window was rolling down. I froze. I should have run. I should have fled to my car and driven until the gas tank was empty, but I could not move. I was rooted to the concrete, a statue of a woman witnessing her own execution. Inside the car, I saw him, Julian. He looked devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit that I had never seen before. He was laughing, his head thrown back, his profile sharp and familiar. The same profile I had kissed that very morning before he left for work. And next to him sat a woman. She was blonde, radiant, and possessed an elegance that seemed effortless. She wore a coat that looked like spun gold, and oversized sunglasses that screamed celebrity. This was Silesia. I did not know her name in that moment, but I knew her type. She was everything I was not. She was the trophy. She was the public face. Julian's hand was resting on hers. It was not a casual touch. It was intimate. His fingers were interlaced with hers, his thumb brushing against her knuckles in a slow, rhythmic caress. It was a gesture of ownership and adoration. It was the way he used to hold my hand in the first year of our marriage, before the work took over. Before the distance grew, the receptionist's voice echoed in my mind. "They are getting married next month. Paris." The Maybach pulled away, merging seamlessly into the chaotic traffic of downtown Chicago. I watched the taillights disappear, 2 red eyes blinking in the distance. I stood alone on the sidewalk. People rushed past me, talking on phones, checking watches, living their lives. I was an island of stillness in a river of motion. I waited for the tears. I waited for the sob that would tear my throat apart, for the collapse, for the hysteria. That is what happens in movies. The betrayed wife falls to her knees and screams at the uncaring sky. But the tears did not come. Instead, a terrifying clarity washed over me. It started at the base of my spine and crept up my neck, a sensation like ice water being poured into my veins. The shock had bypassed grief entirely and gone straight to a numb, clinical observation. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling slightly, but they were still my hands. I touched the velvet box in my purse. The Patek Philippe ticked away inside, oblivious to the fact that the man it was intended for did not exist. The Julian Thorne. I knew the hard-working visionary, the man who preferred courthouse weddings to galas. The man who claimed to be allergic to metal so he could not wear a ring was a fabrication. He was a character played by an actor so skilled I had given him a standing ovation for 4 years. I did not know the man in the Maybach. I did not know the man planning a wedding in Paris. And most terrifying of all, I realized with a jolt that nearly stopped my heart. I did not know who I was anymore. I was Mrs. Thorne to the IRS in the state of Illinois, but to the world Julian had built, I was nobody. I was a ghost haunting a penthouse while he lived his real life in the light. The cold Chicago wind whipped my hair across my face, stinging my eyes. I turned and began the long walk back to the parking garage. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just put one foot in front of the other, listening to the hollow click of my heels on the pavement, marking the rhythm of a life that had just ended. The drive back to the penthouse was a blur of gray highway and autopilot reflexes. I maneuvered my car through the heavy Chicago traffic, but my mind was stuck in a loop, replaying a single sentence like a corrupted audio file. "They are getting married next month." It played over the rhythm of the windshield wipers. It played over the hum of the engine. It played in the silence when I stopped at a red light, when I pulled into our private garage. I sat in the driver's seat for 20 minutes, staring at the concrete wall. This was the wall I had painted a soft slate gray 2 years ago, because Julian said the bare concrete was depressing him. I had spent a weekend on a ladder, my hair covered in paint, trying to make his homecoming slightly more welcoming. I remembered how he had thanked me, kissing my paint-stained cheek and telling me I was the only thing keeping him sane amidst the chaos of building a company. Now, that memory felt like a scene from a movie I had misunderstood entirely. I walked into the apartment. It was silent. The panoramic view of the lake, usually my source of calm, now looked vast and indifferent. I dropped my purse on the kitchen island. The heavy thud of the velvet box hitting the marble echoed through the empty space. I needed to think. I needed to deconstruct the last 4 years and look at the blueprints again. As an architect, I knew that catastrophic structural failures rarely happened without warning signs. There were always hairline fractures, subtle shifts in the foundation, groaning beams that went ignored. I went to the living room and sat on the white leather sofa. Pulling my legs up to my chest, I closed my eyes and forced myself to look at the cracks. First, the ring. Julian did not wear a wedding band. He had explained it on our second date, long before we were even engaged. He claimed to have a severe contact dermatitis reaction to most metals. He showed me a faint scar on his wrist from a childhood watch as proof. I had accepted it. I had even felt protective of him, defending his bare finger to my traditionalist mother. "It is medical, Mother. It is not a statement." But now, staring at the empty space on the third finger of my left hand where his hand should be, the logic crumbled. Platinum is hypoallergenic. Titanium is hypoallergenic. We could have tattooed rings. We could have done anything. But he had chosen nothing. It was not an allergy. It was convenience. A bare finger is a silent invitation. A bare finger makes it very easy to be a fiancé in Paris while being a husband in Chicago. Then, the phone. Julian treated his phone like a nuclear football. It was always face down. It was always on silent. He took calls in his home office with the door locked, citing client confidentiality and sensitive IP discussions. I cannot risk a leak. Faith. One wrong word overheard, and the stock tanks. I had nodded, bringing him coffee and leaving it outside the door like a servant, tiptoeing away so I would not disturb the genius at work. I reached for my own phone. My hands were shaking so bad I had to grip the device with both hands to steady it. We shared our locations. It was a safety measure we had agreed upon after he started traveling internationally. "So you always know I am safe," he had said. I opened the app. The blue dot representing Julian blinked steadily. It was hovering right over the financial district, right over the Ethelgard Dynamics Tower. The office. I stared at the screen. The dot was unmoving. It was stable. It was a lie. I had seen him leave. I had seen the Maybach merge into traffic. I had seen the taillights fade. He was physically gone, likely halfway to a private airfield or a tasting menu at a French bistro. But his digital ghost was dutifully sitting at his desk. He must have left a secondary device there, or spoofed the GPS. The level of premeditation required for that made my stomach turn. This was not a spur-of-the-moment lie. This was infrastructure. I needed to hear his voice. I needed to hear the lie directly to calibrate my own reality. I pressed the call button. It rang once, twice. "Hey, sweetheart." Julian's voice filled the room through the speakerphone. It was warm, slightly breathless, the voice of a man stepping out of an intense meeting to talk to the woman he loved. "I was just thinking about you. Everything okay?" I closed my eyes, letting the familiar cadence of his voice wash over me. It was terrifying how normal he sounded. "I am fine," I said. My voice surprised me. It was steady. It was the voice of Mrs. Thorne, the supportive wife. "I just wanted to say happy anniversary. 5 years since incorporation. I know it is a big day." "Oh, Faith," he sighed, the sound of a man carrying the weight of the world. "You are amazing. I completely lost track of time. It has been a war zone here today. The board is eating me alive over the new logistics algorithms. I have not even had time to pee, let alone celebrate." "I am sorry," I said. "Are you in the conference room now?" "Yeah. Just stepped out for a second. They are debating the budget in there. It is going to be a late night, baby. Do not wait up for me. I might crash on the couch in my office just to get a head start on tomorrow." "Okay," I said. "Don't work too hard. I do it all for us, Faith. You know that." "Love you. Love you too," I said. I did not hang up immediately. I held the phone to my ear for a split second longer before the line went dead. And in that second, I heard it. It was faint, buried under the ambient noise of his connection, but my ears were trained to notice acoustic details. It was the sound of a string quartet playing Vivaldi, and underneath that, the distinct crystal-clear chime of silverware hitting fine china. Boardrooms do not play Vivaldi. Boardrooms do not have the acoustic resonance of a high-ceilinged restaurant. He was at lunch. He was likely pouring wine for the blonde woman. The blonde woman, the receptionist had called her his wife, Mrs. Thorne. I put the phone down and walked to my laptop. I sat at the dining table. The glass surface cold under my forearms. I needed a name. Silesia. Julian had mentioned a Silesia Vance. She was the chief operating officer of Ethelgard, but the way he described her was specific. He had told me she was a 60-year-old battle axe, a woman with steel-gray hair and a personality like sandpaper. He said she was brilliant but impossible, a workaholic widow who hated fun and lived for spreadsheets. I had pictured a grandmotherly figure, stern but harmless. I typed Silesia Vance Ethelgard Dynamics into the search bar. The first result was a LinkedIn profile. I clicked it. The photo that loaded was not of a 60-year-old widow. It was the woman in the Maybach. Silesia Vance was young. She was spectacular. Her profile stated she was 28 years old, a graduate of Wharton, and the co-founder of Ethelgard. Co-founder? Julian had never mentioned a co-founder. He had always said he built it alone, with me as his silent support. I switched tabs to Instagram. Her profile was public. It was a curated gallery of extreme wealth and high-gloss lifestyle. I started scrolling, and with every swipe of my finger, the floor of my reality dropped another foot. 3 weeks ago, Julian told me he was in Tokyo for a desperate round of funding talks with SoftBank. He said he was staying in a capsule hotel to save money because the company cash flow was tight. I found a photo on Silesia's feed from 3 weeks ago. Location, the Amman, Tokyo. The caption read, "Sunrise over the Imperial Palace with my love. Big things coming." In the corner of the photo, resting on a crisp white tablecloth, next to 2 glasses of champagne, was a hand, a man's hand. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. There was a small, faint scar on the wrist. The scar from a childhood watch. 6 months ago, Julian missed my birthday. He said there was a supply chain crisis in Berlin that required his immediate physical presence to prevent a factory shutdown. He had sent me flowers and a sad voicemail about how lonely the hotel room was. Silesia's feed. 6 months ago. Location Soho House. Berlin. A video clip of a rooftop party. The camera panned across a crowd of laughing, beautiful people, and there, for a fraction of a second, was Julian. He was wearing a tuxedo. He was holding a cigar. He looked radiant. I scrolled back further. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. The pattern was absolute. Every crisis, every business trip, every Late night at the office corresponded perfectly with a geotagged photo on Silesia Vance's timeline. He was not just cheating on me. That word felt too small, too domestic. Cheating implied a lapse in judgment, a stolen moment. This was not a lapse. This was a parallel existence. He had created a binary life. In one world, he was Julian the struggling visionary, married to Faith the supportive architect. In that world, money was always tight, stress was always high, and luxury was a sacrifice we made for the future. I was the safe harbor where he docked to refuel, to be taken care of, to have his laundry done and his ego soothed. In the other world, he was Julian the Titan. He was rich. He was carefree. He traveled by private jet and stayed in presidential suites. And in that world, Silesia was his queen. My stomach lurched, a violent spasm of nausea. I ran to the bathroom and dry heaved over the toilet. But nothing came up. I was empty. I washed my face with freezing cold water, staring at my reflection. My skin looked gray. My eyes looked hollow. I went back to the laptop. I had to be sure. I needed one final nail in the coffin of my marriage. I scrolled to a post from last month. It was a selfie of Silesia in what looked like the interior of a private jet. She was wearing a deep red dress, her head thrown back in laughter. Around her neck was a necklace. It was a platinum chain adorned with a cascading waterfall of marquise-cut diamonds. It was distinctive, unique. I stopped breathing. 2 months ago, I had been doing laundry. I had checked the pockets of Julian's suit jacket before taking it to the dry cleaner, a habit of mine. I had found a folded receipt from a high-end jeweler in New York. The price on the receipt was $45,000. When I confronted him, gently, excitedly, thinking perhaps it was a surprise for me, he had turned pale. He told me it was a bribe. He said he had to buy it for the wife of a Saudi investor to close a deal. He said it made him sick to spend that kind of money on a stranger when we needed it for the mortgage. But it was the cost of doing business. He had looked so pained, so guilty about the expense. I had hugged him and told him I understood. I told him he was brave to make the hard calls. I comforted him for buying his mistress a $45,000 necklace. I looked at the photo. Silesia wore the diamonds with an air of entitlement, the light catching the stones that I had essentially paid for by managing our household on a shoestring budget while Julian invested everything back into the company. I closed the laptop. The room was dark now. The sun had set while I was digging through the digital ruins of my life. A scream built in my chest, a primal, jagged thing that wanted to tear the walls down. I wanted to print these photos. I wanted to drive to the Ethelgard Tower and tape them to the glass doors. I wanted to call him right now and scream until my voice gave out. I wanted to burn his clothes. I wanted to destroy him. But then, the architect in me took over. I looked around the living room. I looked at the clean lines, the structural balance. You do not demolish a building by swinging a sledgehammer wildly at the facade. That only creates dust and noise. If you want to bring a structure down, you have to understand its load-bearing points. You have to find the stress fractures. You have to place the charges deep in the foundation where no one can see them until the detonator is pressed. Julian thought I was naive. He thought I was the soft, artistic wife who looked at the world through rose-colored glasses. He relied on my trust. It was the mortar that held his double life together. If I confronted him now, he would spin it. He would lie. He would hide the money. He would disappear with Silesia and leave me with nothing but a drawer full of excuses. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen and picked up the velvet box containing my grandfather's watch. I opened it and looked at the ticking hands. Tick, tick, tick. I snapped the box shut. I would not say a word. I would not shed a tear where he could see it. I would be the Faith he expected. I would be the loving, clueless, supportive wife. I would welcome him home with a hot meal and a warm smile. I would let him think he was the smartest man in the room. And while he slept, I would take his life apart, brick by brick. I picked up my phone and cleared the browser history. I turned on the lights. I went to the refrigerator and took out the ingredients for dinner. I moved with mechanical precision. chopping vegetables with a sharp knife, the rhythm of the blade against the cutting board replacing the sound of my breaking heart. He was coming home in 3 hours. I had exactly that long to learn how to become a liar as good as he was. The morning sun hit the bedroom curtains with the aggressive brightness of an interrogation lamp. I buried my face in the pillow, groaning theatrically as Julian stepped out of the bathroom. He smelled of sandalwood and expensive deception. I told him I had a migraine, the kind with auras that made the world look like shattered glass. It was my first lie to him in 4 years, and it tasted like copper on my tongue. Julian sat on the edge of the bed, his weight depressing the mattress. He stroked my hair with a hand that had held Silesia's only hours before. He told me to rest, to drink water, to call him if I needed anything at all. He said he had a critical strategy meeting and might be late. I nodded into the pillow, waiting for the sound of his footsteps to retreat. The moment the front door clicked shut, the performance ended. I threw off the duvet and moved with the adrenaline of a soldier behind enemy lines. I did not have much time. Julian's commute was 30 minutes. If he forgot a file or a phone charger, he could be back in 40. I needed to be invisible, fast, and surgical. I went straight to his home office. For 4 years, this room had been the Forbidden City. Julian had installed a biometric lock on the heavy oak door. Citing strict compliance laws for government contractors, he claimed the data inside was sensitive enough to ruin the company if compromised. I had respected that boundary. I had dusted the frame, but never the handle. But Julian was arrogant, and arrogance breeds complacency. I knew he kept a physical backup key. He was a man who preached about redundancy in logistics. He would never rely solely on a fingerprint scanner that could fail during a power outage. The question was not if a key existed, but where a creature of habit would hide it. I stood in the hallway, staring at the locked door, engaging my architect's brain. When you design a space, you create flow, but you also create voids, dead spaces behind drywall, hollows under staircases, gaps in cabinetry. I scanned the hallway console table, a vase of lilies, a stack of Architectural Digest magazines, a bronze sculpture of a rearing horse, too obvious, too cliché. Then I looked at the display niche opposite the office door. It held a pristine, 1:100 scale architectural model of the Ethelgard Dynamics Tower. It was a gift I had commissioned for him 2 years ago. I remembered the day it arrived. He had been childishly delighted, spending hours admiring the tiny, laser-cut details. I walked over to the model. It sat on a heavy walnut pedestal. I remembered the design specs of the tower. The foundation had to be reinforced with deep piles to account for the soft soil near the river. I gripped the base of the model tower. It was heavy, fastened to the pedestal, but the landscaping, the tiny, flocked trees and gray-painted plaza surrounding the building was a separate plate. I dug my fingernails under the edge of the miniature plaza and lifted. It gave way with a soft suction sound. There, resting in the hollow space meant for the model's LED wiring, was a small, silver key. I felt no triumph, only a cold, sickening validation. He hid his secrets inside the very symbol of his success. A gift from the wife he was betraying. I took the key. My hand was steady now. The trembling from yesterday was gone, replaced by a terrifying focus. I unlocked the office door and slipped inside, closing it softly behind me. The room was freezing. Julian kept the air conditioning cranked down to 65 degrees. It smelled of static electricity and cold coffee. The blinds were drawn, slicing the morning light into thin, dusty strips. I did not waste time at his main computer. He would have encryption protocols I could not break without an IT team. I went for the physical. I went for the desk. It was a massive slab of reclaimed teak. I checked the drawers, locked. I used the silver key. It turned smoothly. The top drawer held standard office supplies, pens, a stapler, breath mints. I pulled the drawer out further, feeling for a catch. Nothing. I moved to the bottom drawer. The deep one meant for hanging files. It was full of manila folders labeled with boring titles like Tax Compliance 2024 and Insurance Writers. I pulled the files out, stacking them on the floor. At the bottom of the drawer was a false bottom. I could see the slight discrepancy in the wood grain. I pressed on the corners. The panel popped up. I stared into the dark recess of the drawer. Lying there, arranged with psychopathic neatness, were 3 smartphones, burner phones, and beside them, a stack of 4 passports. I picked up the passports first. The blue covers were familiar. United States issue. I opened the first one. The photo was Julian. The same sharp jawline, the same confident eyes, but the name next to the photo was not Julian Thorne. It was David Sterling. I opened the second. Julian's face again. This time with glasses. Name Marcus Vane. The third was a passport from St. Kitts and Nevis. Citizenship by investment. The name was Elias Thorne. These were not just for an affair. You do not need 3 international identities to cheat on your wife. You need them to disappear. You need them when you are running from something that carries a prison sentence. I picked up the phones. 2 were dead, their screens black. The third, an older model iPhone with a cracked screen, had a sliver of battery life left. I pressed the home button. It prompted for a passcode. I hesitated. Julian changed his main passwords every month. He used complex alphanumeric strings generated by an app. But this was an old phone. The casing was scuffed. It looked like a relic from the early days of our relationship. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried the date of incorporation for Ethelgard. Incorrect. I tried the day we met. Incorrect. I closed my eyes, trying to think like the man he was 4 years ago. Before the money, before the arrogance, back when he was trying to charm me, trying to convince me to invest my time and my heart in him. I typed in the date of my grandfather's death. He knew how much I loved that old man. He knew I had inherited the trust fund on that day. The screen unlocked. The cynicism of it almost made me laugh. He used the date of my greatest loss and his greatest financial gain as the key to his secret life. I opened the messaging app. The most recent thread was pinned to the top. The contact name was simply Silesia. I scrolled back to the beginning of the week. Julian. The transfer is stuck in the Caymans. We need to structure the deposits differently. The compliance algorithm at the bank is flagging the lump sums. Silesia. I told you not to move more than 9,000 at a time. You are getting greedy. Julian. If the feds look at the Ethelgard accounts, they will see it is a shell. Julian. They won't look. The government contract gives us cover. It makes us look legitimate. As long as Faith keeps signing the quarterly authorizations for the trust, we have a clean source to mix with the dirty. I stopped reading. The air in the room seemed to vanish. The trust. My family's trust. My grandfather had left me a significant inheritance, a legacy built on 3 generations of steel manufacturing. When Julian started Ethelgard, he had convinced me to let him manage the portfolio. I can triple the yield. Faith, he had said, why let the bank take fees when I can manage it for our future? I had signed the power of attorney. I had signed every document he put in front of me, usually over a glass of wine in the evening, barely reading the fine print because I trusted my husband. He wasn't investing it. He was using my clean, inherited money to wash illegal funds. He was mixing my legacy with whatever dirty cash Ethelgard was actually generating, likely from something far darker than logistics AI. Given the need for multiple passports, I forced myself to keep reading. I needed the full picture. I needed to know the endgame. Silesia. When do we cut the cord? I am tired of playing the COO. I want to be in Paris. Julian soon. The wedding is the trigger. Once we are legally married in France, the spousal transfer laws there will protect the assets. We drain the trust completely on the morning of the ceremony. By the time Faith realizes the accounts are empty, we will be Mr. and Mrs. Sterling living in a non-extradition zone. Silesia. And her Julian, she goes down with the ship. Her name is on the authorization forms. She is the beneficiary of the trust. When the SEC comes knocking about the laundering, it will point back to her. I will just be the negligent husband who didn't know his wife was washing money for the cartel. My hand went over my mouth to stifle a gasp that sounded like a wounded animal. He was not just leaving me, he was framing me. He was going to steal every penny my grandfather had earned, flee the country with his mistress, and leave me to face federal prison for his crimes. I felt a wave of dizziness so strong I had to grab the edge of the desk. The room tilted. The betrayal was so absolute, so comprehensive, it felt like physical violence. He had weaponized my love. He had weaponized my trust. He had weaponized my grief for my grandfather. I wanted to smash the phone. I wanted to burn the house down. Focus, Faith, you are an architect. If the foundation is rotten, you do not move in. You condemn the building. I scrolled further down the thread. There was a file attachment sent 2 days ago. A PDF titled The Manor. Final. I opened it. It was a set of architectural blueprints. I recognized the lines immediately. I recognized the flow of the rooms, the specific angle of the solar roof, the cantilevered master bedroom that hovered over a garden. It was my design. 3 years ago, on a rainy Sunday, I had sketched my dream house on a drafting table while Julian watched. I had drawn a conservatory facing south for my orchids. I had drawn a library with a rolling ladder. I had drawn a nursery with a bay window. It was a fantasy, a doodle of the life I wanted to build with him one day. The blueprints on the screen were a professional rendering of that sketch, but the location in the title block was not Chicago. It was a coastal town in the south of France, and the client name in the bottom corner was not Faith Thorne, property of Silesia Vance. He had stolen my dream. He had taken the most intimate expression of my hope for our future, digitized it, and was building it for her with my money. That was the moment the last ember of love died. It did not flicker out. It was stomped out. What remained in its place was something cold, hard, and incredibly sharp. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the terabyte external hard drive I had brought from my studio. I plugged it into the USB port of his desktop computer. I did not need his password to access the hard drive. If I rebooted the system in recovery mode, a trick I had learned when I used to fix his laptop in the early days. While the computer rebooted, I used my own phone to take high-resolution photos of the passports. I photographed every page of the text thread on the burner phone, scrolling slowly, making sure the dates and timestamps were legible. I photographed the false bottom of the drawer. The computer hummed to life. I bypassed the login and accessed the root directory. I did not select specific files. I did not have the time to sift. I selected the entire user folder documents, emails, hidden caches, browser history, copying, estimated time, 12 minutes, 12 minutes. I sat in his leather chair, watching the green progress bar crawl across the screen. The house was silent, but in my head, a clock was ticking like a bomb. If he came home now, if he had forgotten his wallet, if he sensed something was wrong, it was over. At 6 minutes, the landline on his desk rang. I jumped, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I stared at the phone. It rang 4 times, loud and shrill in the quiet room. Then it went to voicemail. I heard Julian's voice on the answering machine, smooth and professional. Then the beep. "Mr. Thorne," a harsh mechanical voice spoke. "This is an automated alert from the perimeter security system. The biometric lock on the executive office has been bypassed. Please verify status." He had a silent alarm on the door. Of course he did. The alert would have been sent to his mobile phone instantly. He knew. I looked at the screen. 3 minutes remaining. I could not leave. If I pulled the drive now, the data might be corrupted. I needed everything. I needed the financial records, the emails, the proof of the trust transfers. Without it, it was just my word against a man who had successfully played a billionaire for 5 years. "Come on," I whispered, my hands gripping the armrest so hard my knuckles turned white. "Come on." 2 minutes. I heard the distant sound of a car engine in the driveway. He was not 30 minutes away. He had been close, or maybe he had turned around the moment the alert hit his phone. I heard the heavy thud of a car door closing. 1 minute. I heard the front door code being punched in. Beep, 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 click. The front door opened. "Faith," Julian's voice boomed through the hallway. It was not the gentle voice from the morning. It was sharp, panicked, Dangerous. Faith, are you home? I stared at the screen. 98%. Faith, footsteps, heavy, running footsteps coming toward the hallway. 99%. Faith, answer me. Complete. I yanked the drive out. I threw the passports and burner phone back into the drawer. I slammed the false bottom shut. I shoved the file folders back in. I locked the drawer. The footsteps were right outside the door. I spun around, grabbed a bottle of cleaning spray and a rag from the bookshelf where the maid had left them, and dropped to my knees beside the desk just as the door handle turned. The door swung open, hitting the stopper with a violence that made the frames on the wall shudder. Julian stood in the doorway, his chest heaving, his eyes scanning the room like a predator looking for movement. He was expecting a thief, an intruder, or perhaps a spy. What he saw was his wife on her hands and knees, scrubbing a coffee stain out of the Persian rug. I looked up, letting my eyes widen in a perfect imitation of startled innocence. I dropped the rag and put a hand to my chest. Julian, my God, you scared me half to death. What are you doing home? The adrenaline in his eyes didn't vanish instantly. It flickered. Confused by the domestic tableau before him, he looked from me to the desk, then to the biometric lock on the door. The alarm, he said, his voice tight. I got a security alert. The office door was breached. Oh, I said, letting out a breathy, apologetic laugh. That was me. I am so sorry. I spilled my tea in the hallway earlier and tracked it in here when I came to clean. I gestured vaguely with the spray bottle. I know you hate it when the cleaning crew comes in here, so I thought I would just do a quick wipe down while you were gone. I didn't think opening the door would trigger the whole Pentagon response. I stood up, wiping my hands on my jeans. I watched him process the lie. It was plausible. It fit the narrative of Faith the helpful wife, Faith the fastidious homemaker. He relaxed. It was terrifying to watch. The tension drained from his shoulders. The predatory glint left his eyes, and the mask of the loving husband slid back into place. Jesus, Faith, he exhaled, running a hand through his hair. You gave me a heart attack. I thought someone had broken in. I am sorry, I repeated. Walking over to him, I reached out and touched his arm. His suit jacket was cold from the outside air. I should have called. I just wanted everything to be perfect for when you got home. He looked down at me, and for a second, I saw a flicker of something that might have been guilt, or maybe just relief that his secrets were still safe in the drawer I had just locked. He pulled me into a hug. It is okay, he murmured into my hair. Just don't go in there without telling me. Okay, the security protocols are sensitive. I promise, I said. My face pressed against his chest. I could smell her perfume on him. It was faint, layered under his cologne, but it was there, a floral scent, expensive and cloying. It took every ounce of my willpower not to retch. Later that evening, the charade continued. Julian had brought flowers, long-stemmed red roses, the classic, I am sorry I am never home bouquet. He also had a small gift bag from a chocolatier on Michigan Avenue. For missing our morning, he said, handing them to me with a boyish grin. And for scaring you earlier. You are too good to me, I said, accepting the flowers. I actually had a wonderful day. Despite the headache, I went to the spa after I felt better, got a massage, sat in the sauna. It was exactly what I needed. I lied with a fluidity that frightened me. I had spent the afternoon backing up terabytes of incriminating data and researching extradition treaties. But I described the scent of eucalyptus oil in the steam room with convincing detail. We ordered sushi for dinner. We sat at the kitchen island, the same way we had for years. Julian poured sake. He seemed high on his own luck. He had dodged a bullet with the alarm, and he clearly thought he was in the clear. How is the project going? I asked, picking up a piece of tuna sashimi. The big logistics overhaul. Brutal, Julian said, shaking his head. The coding team is behind schedule. And Silesia is being a nightmare about the budget. She wants to cut corners on the server infrastructure to save money for marketing. Can you believe that sacrificing stability for Flash? I chewed slowly, swallowing the bile rising in my throat. Silesia, I said, testing the name on my tongue. She is the older woman, right? The widow. Yeah, Julian said, taking a sip of sake. He did not even blink. She is brilliant. Don't get me wrong, but she is stuck in the 80s. Very conservative, very risk-averse, and honestly, she is bitter. I think she resents that I am the face of the company while she is stuck in the back office. That sounds draining, I said sympathetically. Dealing with difficult personalities is the hardest part of the job. It is, he agreed, looking me right in the eyes. But she is necessary evil. Once this contract is delivered, I might look into buying her out. Get someone younger in there, someone with fresh ideas. The irony was so sharp it could have cut glass. He was talking about replacing his necessary evil mistress with, well, likely nobody, since they were planning to run away together, or perhaps he was already planning to discard her too. Once he had used her to destroy me. Speaking of the new office, I said, keeping my tone casual. Since I missed the surprise visit yesterday, maybe we could go this weekend. I would love to see the space. I could even give you some thoughts on the interior layout before you finalize the furniture. Julian's chopsticks paused for a microsecond. I would love that, babe, but we are doing a massive security update this weekend. The whole building is on lockdown, biometric recalibration, server migration. It is going to be a mess of cables and technicians, not exactly a romantic tour. Oh, that is a shame, I said, pouting slightly. Maybe next week. Definitely, he said, smiling. Next week for sure. Next week he would be in Paris. Next week, if his plan worked, I would be destitute. That night, lying in bed, the silence of the penthouse felt heavy, like the air before a tornado. Julian fell asleep quickly, his breathing deep and even. I lay on my side, facing him, watching the shadows play across his face. He looked peaceful. He looked innocent. I reached out and hovered my hand over his throat. I imagined, for a brief, dark second, closing my fingers. But that would be too easy. That would be messy, and it would not get my life back. I rolled away from him and stared at the city lights. I needed a lawyer, not a divorce lawyer, a shark. The next morning, I drove to a nondescript office building in the West Loop. It was far from the gleaming towers of the financial district. The kind of place that housed bail bondsmen and private investigators. Marcus Steele did not look like a high-powered attorney. He looked like a retired linebacker who had seen too much. He was my father's college roommate, a man who had left corporate law to specialize in financial recovery, a polite term for hunting down white-collar criminals who thought they were untouchable. I sat in his cluttered office and laid it all out, the photos of the passports, the text logs, the bank transfer authorizations, the blueprints of the French villa. Marcus listened in silence, his face unreadable. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. Faith, he said, his voice gravelly. Your husband isn't just a cheat. He is a sociopath. I know, I said. I want to file for divorce. I want to freeze the assets. I want him arrested. Marcus shook his head slowly. If you file now, he wins. How? I demanded. I have proof of fraud. You have photos of a phone screen, Marcus corrected. Inadmissible without a warrant. You have photos of passports that he can claim were props or jokes, and the transfers from the trust you signed the authorizations. He has your signature on every single document. He can claim you were a willing participant, that you were trying to evade taxes. It becomes a he said, she said. And he has the expensive lawyers and the clean public image. He will bury you in litigation for 10 years while he spends your money in a country that won't send him back. So what do? I asked, my voice trembling. Just let him steal everything. No, Marcus leaned forward, his eyes hard. We don't sue him. We trap him. We need him to commit a felony on record, undeniable and traceable. We need him to try to move the final lump sum, the wedding gift, to himself. And we need to catch him doing it. He is planning to do it the morning of the wedding, I said. In Paris. That is too late, Marcus said. Once that money hits an offshore account, it is gone. We need to force his hand earlier. We need to make him panic. We need to make him think the walls are closing in so he tries to move the money now. How? You said there is a gala, Marcus said, glancing at his notes. The Ethelgard charity ball. Yes, I nodded. Next Saturday. It is a black tie event at the new headquarters. He is going to introduce Silesia as the co-founder. That is his stage, Marcus said, a grim smile touching his lips. He feels safe there. He feels powerful. That is where we hit him. But you can't just show up as the angry wife. He will have security escort you out as a hysterical woman. You need to be there legitimately. You need to be a threat he can't remove. I thought about the gala. Julian had not invited me. He had told me it was a boring investor thing, and that spouses were not attending. I can get in, I said, a plan forming in my mind. The invitation list includes top donors to the Chicago Arts Fund. I am a member. I use my maiden name for donations. Good, Marcus said. But you need to be more than a guest. You need to be a ghost. You need to rattle him so bad he makes a mistake. I left Marcus's office with a list of instructions and a burner phone of my own. That afternoon, I started the liquidation. I could not touch the trust without alerting Julian. But I had jewelry, I had designer bags, I had art. I took the Patek Philippe watch to a dealer I knew. He offered me $12,000. I took it in cash. I sold my Hermes collection to a consignment shop for another $15,000. I emptied my personal savings account, the small one Julian didn't monitor, because he thought it was cute money. In total, I gathered nearly $50,000. It was a war chest. I opened a new account at a credit union in the suburbs, under my mother's maiden name. I deposited the cash. Then, I went shopping, but not for clothes. I bought a high-end listening device, smaller than a dime. I bought a GPS tracker that hardwired into a car's electrical system, undetectable by standard sweeps. When I got home, I waited until Julian was in the shower. I slipped out to the garage. I slid under the chassis of his Maybach. My hands were greasy and shaking. But I found the wiring harness. I spliced the tracker in, back inside. I checked the mail. There was a thick, cream-colored envelope addressed to Ms. Faith Treadwell. It was my invitation to the Ethelgard Gala. Julian had clearly instructed his assistant to filter the guest list, but the automated system for high-tier donors had bypassed him. It was a clerical error, a glitch, or maybe, just maybe, it was fate. I held the invitation in my hand. The cardstock was heavy, expensive. The font was elegant gold foil. Ethelgard Dynamics cordially invites you to a night of vision and future. Vision and future, I whispered to the empty room. I walked to my closet. I pushed aside the sensible beige and cream outfits Julian liked me to wear. In the back, covered in plastic, was a dress I had bought years ago and never worn. It was a deep, blood-red silk, backless, with a slit that went up to the thigh. It was aggressive. It was dangerous. It was not a dress for a wife. It was a dress for a widow. I held it up against my body in the mirror. Julian wanted a stage. I would give him a performance he would never forget. The grand hall of the Ethelgard Dynamics Tower was designed to intimidate. It was a cavern of glass and polished steel, soaring 3 stories high, with a ceiling that mimicked the night sky using thousands of fiber optic lights. I walked into the space not as the supportive wife who baked cookies for the staff, but as Faith Treadwell, principal architect and donor to the Chicago Arts Fund. I had bypassed the main guest list entirely. Julian had likely scrubbed my name from the spouse registry, but he had forgotten that the silent art auction taking place in the West Wing was open to high-tier patrons of the arts. I had registered under my professional name, paid the $5,000 entry fee from my new secret account, and walked right past the security team that had been instructed to keep Mrs. Thorne out. I caught my reflection in a pane of darkened glass. I barely recognized myself. The woman staring back was not the soft, beige-wearing creature Julian had molded over 4 years. This woman was dangerous. My dress was a slash of crimson silk that clung to my body like a second skin, leaving my back entirely bare. I had styled my hair in sharp, old Hollywood waves and painted my lips a shade of red that looked like a fresh wound. I wore no jewelry except for a pair of diamond studs that I had bought for myself years ago. I did not need ornaments. I was the weapon. The room was thick with the smell of expensive perfume, catering grade A Wagyu beef, and unbridled ambition. Waiters in white gloves circulated with trays of champagne. A string quartet played in the corner, the music barely audible over the roar of 300 wealthy people congratulating each other on being wealthy. I scanned the room. It did not take long to find the center of gravity, near the platinum donor wall. Holding court like a monarch was Silesia Vance. She was breathtaking. I had to give her that. She wore a gown of shimmering silver that looked like liquid mercury. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon that highlighted her long neck. She was laughing at something a heavy-set investor was saying, her head thrown back, her hand resting possessively on the lapel of the man standing next to her. Julian. He looked impeccable in a tuxedo that I knew cost $6,000 because I had picked it up from the tailor. He looked relaxed, powerful, the king of his little kingdom. He was smiling at Silesia with a look of adoration that I used to think was reserved for me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, bird-like rhythm. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to hide, to vomit. But I forced my feet to move. I forced my breathing to slow. I channeled the cold architecture of the building itself, steel, glass, unyielding. I waited until Julian turned away to greet another group of investors. This was my window. I moved through the crowd, sliding between tuxedoed bodies like a shark through water. I approached Silesia from the side. She was currently alone for a brief second, sipping her champagne and surveying the room with a look of bored superiority. "The lighting in here is tragical," I said, my voice smooth and low. "It washes out the artwork, but it certainly makes the jewelry pop." Silesia turned to look at me. Her eyes swept over my red dress, assessing the cost, the fit, the threat level. She did not recognize me. Why would she? To her, Julian's wife was a non-entity, a ghost, perhaps even dead if Julian's lies were bold enough. To her, I was just another wealthy woman at a gala. "It is designed to highlight the architecture," Silesia said, her tone cool and dismissive. "But I suppose not everyone appreciates the industrial aesthetic." "Oh, I appreciate architecture," I said, stepping closer into her personal space. "I appreciate how structure hides the flaws in the foundation. But I was actually admiring your necklace. It is stunning." Silesia's hand went instinctively to her throat. Her fingers brushed the cascading diamonds, the $45,000 lie. "Thank you," she said, her smile widening just a fraction. Vanity was her weak point. "It is a custom piece. Marquise cut," I observed, leaning in to inspect it with the clinical eye of a jeweler. "Very difficult to source stones of that clarity. Whoever gave that to you must have very deep pockets, or a very guilty conscience." Silesia laughed, a sharp, tinkling sound. "Neither. My fiancé has impeccable taste. He designed it for me himself. He said he wanted something that captured my brilliance." The audacity of the lie almost made me stagger. Julian could not draw a stick figure, let alone design jewelry. He had walked into a store, pointed at the most expensive thing in the case, and swiped a card that was linked to my inheritance. "He sounds like a man of many talents," I said, my voice tight. "Is he here tonight? I would love to meet the man who designed such a masterpiece." "He is the CEO," Silesia said, gesturing vaguely toward the crowd. "Julian Thorne. I am sure you have heard of him. He is the visionary behind all of this." "I have heard many things about Julian Thorne," I said. "My name is Faith. I am in construction, you could say." "Silesia Vance," she said, offering a limp hand. "COO and co-founder." At that moment, the crowd parted. Julian was walking back toward her, holding 2 fresh glasses of champagne. He was smiling. looking at the floor as he navigated the guests. "Babe, I grabbed you the vintage rosé. I know you hate the—" He looked up. His eyes locked onto the red dress first. Then they traveled up to my face. The glass in his left hand slipped. It did not shatter. He caught it against his chest, sloshing champagne onto his tuxedo jacket. But the clumsiness of the movement was so out of character for the poised Julian Thorne that several people turned to look. His face went the color of old ash. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like a man seeing a corpse walk out of a grave. He froze, staring at me. The terror in his eyes was absolute. He looked from me to Silesia, calculating the blast radius. Silesia frowned, noticing his reaction. "Julian, darling, are you all right? You look like you have seen a ghost." He was seeing a ghost. He was seeing the ghost of the wife he thought was safely tucked away in his penthouse, watching Netflix and waiting for his return. He rushed forward. It was not a walk. It was a panic-stricken lunge. He closed the distance between us in 3 long strides, positioning himself physically between me and Silesia, as if he could block the truth with his body. "Faith," he hissed, the name barely a breath. I smiled. It was the brightest, most professional smile I had ever mustered. I extended my hand, not as a wife, but as a business associate. "Mr. Thorne," I said, my voice projecting clearly over the ambient noise. "It is a pleasure to finally see the inside of the new headquarters. The use of negative space is quite impressive." Julian stared at my hand. He was paralyzed. If he acknowledged me as his wife, his game with Silesia was over. If he ignored me, I could cause a scene that would destroy the gala. He took my hand. His palm was cold and clammy with sweat. His grip was weak. "Ms. Treadwell," he stammered, using my maiden name. He was quick on his feet. I had to give him that. I did not know you were attending tonight." Silesia looked between us, her eyes narrowing. "You two know each other?" "Briefly," I said, before Julian could speak. "Mr. Thorne and I have crossed paths in the design world. I am an architect. I was just telling Ms. Vance how much I admire the necklace you designed." I put a slight emphasis on the word designed. Julian flinched. His eyes darted nervously to Silesia, checking if she had caught the sarcasm. "Right," Julian choked out. "Yes, Faith is a talented architect." "And a potential investor," I added, looking at Silesia. "I have been following Ethelgard's financial trajectory with great interest, especially the recent capital infusions. Very creative accounting." Julian's hand clamped down on my arm. It was painful. "We should discuss that in private," he said, his voice straining to sound jovial but carrying a menacing undertone. "Why don't we step over to the bar I think Silesia needs to greet the senator?" "I am fine, Julian," Silesia said, looking at him with annoyance. "Why are you acting so strange? And look at your jacket. You have spilled wine all over yourself." "It is nothing," Julian said, trying to pull me away. "Faith, if you would excuse us." I planted my feet. I was wearing 4-inch heels, but I felt rooted to the earth. I leaned in close to him, invading his personal space in a way that looked intimate to an observer but felt like a knife fight to him. "You look terrible." "Julian," I whispered, my lips inches from his ear. "You are sweating. People are watching." "What are you doing here?" he hissed back, his voice trembling with rage and fear. "Get out. Get out right now, or I will have security drag you out." "Riot," I whispered. "Call them. Make a scene. The moment a guard touches me, I will climb onto that stage and tell every investor in this room exactly whose money paid for this party. I will tell Silesia about the wife you left at home with a migraine. I will tell the senator about the multiple passports in your bottom drawer." He went rigid. The color that had returned to his face drained away again. "What do you want?" he pleaded, his voice cracking. "I want you to smile," I said, pulling back to look him in the face. I want you to look like the charming, successful sociopath you are, and I want you to introduce me to your friends. Faith, please, he begged, his eyes darting around the room. Smile, darling, I said, my voice hardening into steel. Or I scream. He swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. Slowly, painfully, he forced the corners of his mouth up. It was a grotesque rictus of a smile, terrified and hollow, but it passed for social politeness from a distance. That is better, I said. I turned back to Silesia, who was watching this exchange with growing suspicion. Mr. Thorne was just telling me how much he values transparency in his partnerships, I lied smoothly. It was lovely meeting you, Ms. Vance. Enjoy your evening, and do be careful with that necklace. Things bought with stolen money have a way of becoming heavy. Silesia blinked. Excuse me. Just an architectural metaphor, I said with a dazzling smile. Structural integrity is everything, isn't it? I stepped back. Julian looked like he was about to vomit. He could not move. He could not speak. He was trapped in the center of his own web, watching the fly walk away. Oh, one more thing, I said, pausing as if I had forgotten a trivial detail. I opened my clutch purse. I pulled out a heavy, cream-colored business card. I had printed it that afternoon at a 24-hour print shop. I slipped the card into the open side pocket of Silesia's silver clutch, which she was holding loosely at her side. In case you ever need a renovation, I said. Silesia frowned and pulled the card out. She read it. Faith Treadwell, architect, and handwritten on the back in sharp, black ink, the architect of the house you are building in Nice. Ask him about the conservatory. I saw the confusion hit her face first, followed by the dawn of a question she did not want to ask. She looked up at me, then at Julian. Julian saw the card. He knew exactly what it meant. He knew that I knew about the villa. He knew that I knew about the escape plan. Enjoy the gala, I said. I turned on my heel and walked away. I walked through the crowd, the red silk of my dress flowing behind me like a trail of blood. I felt the eyes of the room on me, but I did not care. I did not look back. I did not need to. I knew exactly what was happening behind me. I knew Silesia was demanding answers. I knew Julian was stammering, lying, trying to put out a fire that was already consuming the oxygen in the room. I walked out of the double doors and into the cool night air. My hands were shaking now, a delayed reaction to the adrenaline, but I felt a savage sense of satisfaction. I had not just crashed his party. I had planted a bomb in the middle of his relationship. Now, all I had to do was wait for the explosion. I walked to my car, the GPS tracker app on my phone glowing in the dark. The dot representing Julian's car was stationary in the garage below, but I knew it wouldn't be stationary for long. He would panic. He would try to move the money. He would try to accelerate the timeline. And when he did, I would be watching. Julian came through the front door like a hurricane making landfall. The heavy oak slammed against the frame with enough force to rattle the crystal chandelier in the foyer. I was sitting in the living room, legs tucked under me on the plush white sofa, sipping a cup of herbal tea and reading a magazine about sustainable urban planning. I had scrubbed the red lipstick off and changed into silk pajamas, transforming back into the domestic fixture he expected to find, though the lingering scent of my perfume still hung faintly in the air. He stormed into the room, tearing his bow tie loose. His face was a map of panic, sweat glistening on his forehead despite the cool autumn air outside. "What the hell was that? Faith," he shouted, his voice cracking. "What were you thinking?" I looked up slowly, marking my page with a calm deliberation that I knew would infuriate him. "Hello to you too, darling. I take it the gala didn't end well. You seemed so distracted when I saw you." Distracted. He paced in front of the coffee table, running his hands through his hair until it stood up in spikes. "You ambushed me. You showed up uninvited. You harassed Silesia, and you threatened to make a scene in front of my biggest investors. Do you have any idea how unprofessional you looked?" I set my teacup down with a soft click. Unprofessional, I think you are confused. Julian, I paid $5,000 for a ticket to the art auction. I was there as a patron of the arts and a principal architect. I was networking. Isn't that what you always tell me to do? Get out more. Faith, expand your horizons. Faith. You were baiting her, he yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. You put that card in her bag. Ask him about the conservatory. What kind of game are you playing? I widened my eyes, feigning total innocence. I was just being helpful. She mentioned she liked architecture. I thought she might appreciate knowing that the conservatory in your client's project in Nice has excellent southern exposure. Why does that upset you so much? Unless, of course, there is something about that house you don't want people to know. He froze. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. He was trapped. He couldn't admit the house was for her without admitting he was building it with stolen money. He couldn't claim it was for a client because he had told Silesia he designed it. You are acting crazy, he muttered, deflecting. It was his go-to move. You are stress testing me. Faith, I have the biggest launch of my career coming up, and you are trying to sabotage me because you feel neglected. I am not the one sweating through a $6,000 tuxedo, I said softly. Why are you so terrified? Julian, if you have nothing to hide, my presence shouldn't rattle you. You look like a man standing on a trap door. He stared at me, searching for the crack in my armor, looking for the weeping, insecure wife he could manipulate. But she wasn't there. I am going to bed, he snapped. Do not come to the office tomorrow. Stay away from Silesia. Stay away from my business. Sleep tight, I said. He didn't sleep tight. I lay awake next to him and listened to him toss and turn for hours. Every time he drifted off, I would accidentally kick him or cough, jerking him back into a state of anxiety. It was petty, but after 4 years of lies, petty felt like justice. The next morning, the real game began. I waited until he was in the shower to start the psychological dismantling. I went downstairs to the router hidden in the hallway closet. I logged into the admin portal and changed the Wi-Fi password. I didn't change it to a random string of numbers. I changed it to Riviera 2026. Then, I went to the kitchen. I had collected a stack of travel brochures from a travel agency the day before. I fanned them out on the kitchen island, right next to his coffee machine. Paris, the city of love. Honeymoon suites at the Ritz. One-way tickets to paradise. When Julian came downstairs, he looked like a walking corpse. He poured his coffee and reached for his phone to check his morning emails. Damn it, he hissed, tapping the screen. The Wi-Fi is down. Is it? I asked, buttering a piece of toast. Mine is working fine. Maybe you need to re-enter the password. The system reset last night. What is the new password? He asked, irritated. Oh, I wrote it down somewhere, I said, pretending to search my pockets. I think it is Riviera something, or maybe just Paris. Try Riviera 2026. He froze, his thumb hovering over the screen. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. Why would you choose that? I didn't, I said, looking confused. It came with the router update. Random generation. I guess. Isn't that weird? He didn't type it in. He switched to cellular data, looking at the router closet with deep suspicion. Then he turned to the counter and saw the brochures. He picked up the one for the Ritz, Paris. His hand was trembling. Planning a trip? He asked, his voice tight. Oh, those. I laughed. Junk mail. Can you believe it? They just leave this trash in the lobby. I meant to throw it out. Although, looking at them, Paris does sound lovely this time of year. Maybe we should go. For our anniversary. I watched the color drain from his face. Paris was his escape hatch. It was his sanctuary with Silesia. Me suggesting it polluted his fantasy. We are too busy, he grunted, shoving the brochures into the recycling bin with unnecessary force. I have to go. He left without kissing me goodbye. 10 minutes later, I sat in my home office and opened a secure messaging app on my burner phone. I had taken a photo of Julian 2 nights ago, while he was asleep in our bed, his mouth slightly open, drooling on the pillow. It was unglamorous. It was domestic. And most importantly, the digital clock on the nightstand in the background clearly displayed the date and time. I attached the photo to a message. Recipient Silesia Vance. Subject. He sleeps so soundly when he is home. I hit send. Then I opened the laptop and pulled up the feed from the hidden camera I had installed in the Maybach. It took 20 minutes for the fireworks to start. I watched on the screen as Julian pulled into the underground garage of the Ethelgard Tower. He didn't get out immediately. The passenger door opened, and Silesia slid into the seat next to him. She didn't look like the Ice Queen from the gala. She looked furious. She shoved her phone in his face. "Explain this," she screamed. The audio from the tracker was crisp and clear. "You told me you were sleeping in the office. You told me you hadn't touched her in 2 years. "I wasn't," Julian stammered, looking at the photo on her screen. "Silesia, baby, listen to me. That is old. She is manipulating the metadata. She is crazy. The date is on the clock, Julian." She hit him on the shoulder with her clutch. "You are lying to me. You are playing both sides. Are you even leaving her? Or is the villa just a vacation home for your little harem?" "I am leaving her," Julian yelled back, grabbing her wrists. "The plan hasn't changed. The money moves next week. We go to Paris. We never look back. You have to trust me." "Trust you." Silesia laughed. A bitter, jagged sound. She put a card in my bag. "Julian, she knows about the house. She knows about the conservatory. How does she know if you didn't tell her?" "I didn't tell her. She must have hacked my email or found the blueprints. She is smarter than she looks. If she knows about the house, she knows about the money," Silesia said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "If she goes to the feds before we launch, we both go to prison. You need to fix this, now." "I will," Julian promised. "I will handle her." "You better," Silesia threatened. "Because if I go down, Julian, I am taking you with me. I have the ledgers. I have the recordings. Do not forget who built this laundromat for you." I closed the laptop. Laundromat. So Silesia was the architect of the financial crime. While Julian was the face, they were turning on each other. Good. That evening, I decided to tighten the noose. Julian came home early, carrying takeout boxes. He was trying to pivot back to the nice guy strategy, clearly thinking he could charm me into submission one last time. We ate in the kitchen. The atmosphere was brittle. "Julian," I said, pushing my food around the plate. "I have been thinking about the future." He tensed up instantly. "What about it?" "I am not happy with how the trust is performing," I said. "The market is volatile, and I have been reading about this incredible opportunity in sustainable housing, a development project in Oregon." "Oregon?" he asked, skeptical. "Yes, it is a full buy-in. I want to liquidate the trust, all of it, cash out and reinvest in the Oregon project. I have already set up a meeting with the fund managers for Monday morning to initiate the withdrawal." Julian dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the ceramic plate. "You can't do that," he said. "It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command." "Why not?" I asked, tilting my head. "It is my money. Julian, you have power of attorney." "Sure, but I am the beneficiary. I can revoke it at any time. I want to move the money Monday." "Monday is too soon," he shouted, standing up. "You can't just pull $8 million out of the market. There are penalties. There are tax implications. You will lose 30% of the value." "I don't care about the penalties," I said calmly. "I care about ethical investing. And I don't like how opaque your management has been lately. I am moving the money." "No, you are not." He was sweating again. He walked around the island, looming over me. "The money it is tied up, in long-term bonds, lockup period. We can't touch it for another 6 months." "That is funny," I said, slipping my hand under the table and tapping the record button on my phone. Because the last statement you showed me said it was in liquid assets. Are you telling me you moved my money into locked bonds without my permission? I did it to protect you. He lied, his eyes darting around the room. The market was crashing. I had to move it fast. It is for your own good. Faith, you don't understand finance. I understand theft, I said quietly. Where is the money? Julian, is it in bonds? Or is it sitting in a shell account in the Caymans, waiting to pay for a wedding in Paris? He slammed his hand on the counter. Stop talking about Paris. There is no Paris. The money is safe. It is just borrowed, temporarily borrowed. I pressed. You borrowed $8 million of my inheritance for what? For Ethelgard, he screamed. To cover the margin calls. The lenders were going to break my legs. Faith, I had to. I will put it back. I swear. After the launch. The Skyline Dreams launch will bring in $50 million. I will put every cent back plus interest. Just give me until next week. Do not call the bank. Who are the lenders? Julian? I asked, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. Banks don't break legs. He slumped against the counter, suddenly looking very small and very defeated. Not banks, investors, private investors. They are not good people. Faith, if I don't pay them back by the launch date, they won't just sue me. They will come for me. They will come for us. I stopped the recording. I had him. I had the admission of embezzlement. I had the admission of associating with organized crime. You are in deep trouble, Julian, I said, standing up and taking my plate to the sink. I suggest you figure it out, but I'm calling the bank on Monday. You have 48 hours. Faith, please. He grabbed my arm. You are killing me. If you freeze those accounts, I can't pay Vargas. If I can't pay Vargas, I am a dead man. Vargas, the name of the loan shark, another piece of the puzzle. Then you better make sure that launch is a success, I said, pulling my arm free, because I am done funding your mistakes. I walked upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and sent the audio file to Marcus. Subject the confession, attachment audio, _clip, _04.mp3. Marcus replied, 3 minutes later, we have enough for the feds. But if Vargas is involved, this is dangerous. He is cartel affiliated. We need to end this now. Not yet. I typed back. He still has his reputation. He still has the launch. If we arrest him now, he spins it as a tragic misunderstanding. I want him destroyed publicly. I want him to lose the only thing he loves more than money, his image. The Skyline Dreams launch was in 2 days. It was going to be the biggest event in the tech world this quarter. Julian was going to stand on a stage and present a vision of a perfect future. I looked at the blueprints of the house in Nice again. I looked at the photos of Silesia wearing my diamonds. I wasn't going to let him have his moment. I was going to turn his launch into his eulogy. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had found in Julian's trash folder on his computer. It was the direct line to the AV technician in charge of the launch presentation, a man Julian had fired and rehired 3 times, a man who was disgruntled and underpaid. Hello, a wary voice answered. Hello, Mr. Henderson, I said. This is Faith Treadwell. I understand you are running the projection mapping for the Skyline Dreams reveal. I have some updated media files that Mr. Thorne wants to be included. It is a surprise for the audience. Mr. Thorne didn't tell me about any changes, the technician said. That is because he wants it to be a surprise, I said, my voice sweet as poison. And I am willing to pay $20,000 in cash to ensure it runs seamlessly. Do we have a deal? There was a long silence on the other end. Send me the files, he said. I smiled. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was dress for the slaughter. The text message I sent to Silesia Vance was brief, and to the point. I have the marriage certificate, and I have the loan documents with your signature. Starbucks on Wacker Drive, 2 p.m. Come alone, or I send them to the SEC. She arrived 5 minutes early. She wore dark sunglasses and a trench coat belted tightly at the waist. looking like a spy from a noir film who had taken a wrong turn into a coffee shop. She sat down opposite me without ordering a drink. Her face was pale, stripped of the arrogance she had worn at the gala. "What do you want?" she hissed, keeping her voice low. "If you are trying to blackmail me—" "I am not here for money, Silesia," I said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "I am here to show you that you are not the co-pilot. You are the parachute." She frowned and opened the envelope. The first document was a certified copy of my marriage license to Julian, dated 4 years ago. No divorce decree had ever been filed. The second document was the bombshell. It was a loan agreement from a private equity firm, a front for the Vargas cartel for $5 million. The borrower was listed as Silesia Vance, but the signature at the bottom, while it looked like hers, had a telltale tremor at the top of the S. "I didn't sign this," she whispered, staring at the paper. "I never authorized a loan this size. Julian handles the financing. He said we had angel investors." "He forged your signature," I said calmly. "Just like he forged mine on the trust transfer authorizations. He is setting us up. Silesia, if Ethelgard collapses, and it will, you are the one on the hook for the cartel debt, and I am the one on the hook for the embezzlement. Julian." He walks away clean as David Sterling with a new face and a villa in Nice. Silesia dropped the paper as if it burned her fingers. She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw the woman behind the mistress. She wasn't just a trophy. She was terrified. She was smart enough to understand the implications instantly. "He told me he loved me," she said, her voice trembling. "He told me you were a leech, that you were emotionally abusive and wouldn't let him go. He said the villa was for us to start over." "The villa is real," I said, "but the us part is negotiable. Look at the date on the deed transfer." She looked. "Transferred to the Sterling Trust." "He controls the Sterling Trust," I explained. "Not you, not me. If you run away with him to France, you are not the lady of the manor. You are a fugitive living in a house owned by a ghost, and when he gets tired of you, or when the cartel comes looking for their money, he will trade you to them to save his own skin." Silesia slumped back in her chair. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She looked exhausted, young, and incredibly foolish. It was hard to hate her in that moment. We were both just assets in Julian's portfolio, depreciating daily. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "I slept with your husband. I helped him. I helped him hide money. I thought I was helping him protect his genius." "Because I need access to the server," I said flatly. "I need the unencrypted ledgers to prove he is the mastermind. I can't get past the biometric firewall." "But you are the COO. You have admin clearance." "If I give you the ledgers, I implicate myself," she argued. "I will go to prison for fraud." "Not if you turn state's witness," I countered. "I have already spoken to my lawyer, Marcus Steele. He is in contact with the FBI. If you cooperate, if you hand over the data and testify against Julian, they will offer you immunity for the fraud charges. You might lose your job. Silesia, you might lose your reputation, but you won't lose your freedom, and you won't have Vargas coming after you for $5 million. She stared at her hands. She twisted the diamond ring on her finger, the ring bought with my money. "He is going to destroy me," she whispered. "He already has," I said. "The question is, do you want to be destroyed by him, or do you want to be the one who pushes the button?" Silesia looked up. Her jaw tightened. The fear in her eyes hardened into something else. Rage. Cold. Calculating rage. It was a look I recognized because I saw it in the mirror every morning. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "Tonight," I said. "Get me the raw data files for the Skyline Dreams project. The real ones. Not the fake demo he is showing the investors, and I need you to upload a specific video file to the presentation server." "The launch is tomorrow," she said. "Exactly," I smiled. "We are going to give Julian the send-off he deserves." Silesia reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. She placed it on the table. I made a backup, she said. Last night, after you put the card in my bag, I started looking at the accounts. I didn't want to believe it, but the numbers didn't add up. I took the drive. You are smarter than he gives you credit for. We both are, she said. We parted ways without a handshake. We weren't friends. We were allies of necessity. Two women standing in the wreckage of the same lie. I took the flash drive straight to Marcus. He was waiting in his office with two agents from the FBI. They were stern men in gray suits who looked like they didn't believe in humor. I played the audio recording of Julian confessing to the Vargas debt. I showed them the forged loan documents Silesia had provided. I handed over the flash drive with the real ledgers. This is a slam dunk, Agent Miller said. Looking at the screen, we have him on wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering, and conspiracy. We can pick him up tonight. No, I said firmly. Not tonight. Ms. Treadwell, the other agent, Agent Rossi, warned. He is a flight risk. If he smells smoke, he runs. He won't run before the launch, I said. His ego won't let him. He thinks he can talk his way out of the financial hole if the launch is a success. He needs that applause. If you arrest him tonight, quietly at his house, he becomes a martyr. He claims it is a government overreach. He claims he is being targeted. I want him arrested on stage. I want the world to see him for what he is. Marcus looked at the agents. My client is willing to wear a wire to the event. She will be in the room. We can coordinate the takedown. The agents exchanged a look. It was unorthodox. It was theatrical. But it was also undeniable. Fine, Agent Miller said. But we have teams at every exit. If he even looks like he's heading for the door, we take him down. He won't run, I promised. He thinks he is the smartest man in the room. That night, Julian came home late. He was humming. He carried a bottle of champagne. Great news, babe, he announced, popping the cork. The Oregon deal, I found a way to bridge the gap. We don't need to liquidate the trust on Monday. I secured a short-term loan to cover the investment. Your money can stay where it is. He was lying. He hadn't secured a loan. He was stalling, hoping the launch tomorrow would generate enough pre-order cash to pay off Vargas, and then he would flee with the rest of my trust money before I could touch it. That is wonderful, Julian, I said, accepting the glass. You always find a way. I do, he said, clinking his glass against mine. To us, to the future. To God. To the future, I echoed. He slept like a baby that night. He thought he had won. He thought he had pacified his wife, managed his mistress, and outsmarted the cartel. He had no idea that the two women he was playing had just rewritten the script. The morning of the launch. The air in Chicago was crisp and electric. I woke up before him. I didn't make coffee. I didn't make breakfast. I showered and dressed in silence. I didn't choose the beige suit. I didn't choose the cream dress. I pulled the garment bag from the back of the closet. The dress was red, not the dark crimson of the gala, but a bright, violent scarlet. It was a power suit, actually sharp tailoring, wide-legged trousers, and a blazer that fit like armor. It was the color of a stop sign, the color of a warning, the color of blood in the water. I applied my makeup with surgical precision, sharp liner, bold brow, and lips painted to match the suit. When I walked downstairs, Julian was already in the kitchen, frantically typing on his phone. He looked up and blinked. Whoa, he said. That is bright. It is a big day, I said. I wanted to look the part. You are coming. He frowned. Faith, I told you, it is going to be technical, boring. You will hate it. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I said, grabbing my purse. I want to see my husband shine. He checked his watch. He didn't have time to argue. Fine, but stay in the VIP box. Don't wander around. The security is tight. I will be right where I need to be, I promised. We drove to the venue in separate cars. He took the Maybach. I took my sensible sedan. I watched him pull away, the tracker on my phone showing his route. He didn't go straight to the venue. He made a stop. I zoomed in on the map. O'Hare International Airport, private aviation terminal. He was dropping off a bag. He was stashing his escape kit. He planned to go straight from the launch to the plane. I called Agent Miller. He is making a drop at the airport. Private hangar. Tail number N4590T. We are on it, Miller replied. We will disable the plane. I arrived at the Ethelgard Tower. The atmosphere was hysterical. Press vans lined the street. Fans of the tech brand were camped out hoping for a glimpse of the genius. I walked in through the side entrance. Flashing my VIP pass, I went straight to the server room. The guard at the door moved to stop me. Authorized personnel only, he grunted. I am Mrs. Thorne, I said, and I have a specialized drive from the CEO. He needs this uploaded for the finale. It is the updated rendering. The guard hesitated. He called up to the control booth. Yeah, let her in. The voice of Henderson, the AV guy I had bribed, crackled over the radio. I walked into the cool humming room. Henderson was sitting at the console, looking nervous. You have the file, he asked. I handed him the flash drive Silesia had given me. This replaces the entire third act, I said, when he cues the Vision of Tomorrow segment. You run this. You sure about this? Henderson asked. If this crashes the system, I am fired. Henderson, I said, placing a thick envelope of cash on the console. After today, there won't be a company to fire you from. He took the envelope, queuing it up. I left the server room and made my way to the VIP box. It overlooked the massive stage. The room was packed with 2,000 people, investors, journalists, tech influencers. Julian was backstage. I could see him on the monitors, pacing, drinking water, getting his makeup touched up. He looked ready. He looked like a god preparing to address his worshippers. Silesia entered the box. She was wearing black, mourning clothes. She didn't look at me. She sat in the corner, staring at the stage with a blank expression. Is it done? I asked quietly, not turning my head. It is done, she whispered. The plane is grounded, the FBI is in the wings, and the file is loaded. Good. The lights in the auditorium dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. The music swelled a triumphant, orchestral score that shook the floorboards. A spotlight hit center stage. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer boomed, the architect of the future, Julian Thorne. Julian walked out. The applause was deafening. He waved, smiling that $1,000,000 smile. He looked up at the VIP box. He saw me in my red suit. He saw Silesia in her black dress. He winked. He actually winked. He thought he had us both under control. He thought he was about to pull off the greatest heist of his life. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hand. Go ahead. Julian, I thought, start the show. To understand the man standing on that stage, smiling like a golden god under the spotlight, you have to understand the man who sat across from me 12 hours earlier. The public saw the visionary. I saw the desperate animal gnawing off its own leg to escape a trap. The night before the launch, Julian invited me to dinner. He chose Ever, a place where dinner was not a meal, but a 4-hour performance of molecular gastronomy. It was intimate, expensive, and intimidatingly quiet, the perfect setting for a coercion disguised as a date. I booked the private alcove, he had texted me. We need to celebrate the Oregon deal properly. I arrived precisely on time. I wore a simple black dress, high-necked and long-sleeved, funeral attire. Though he did not know it yet, Julian was already at the table. He was halfway through a glass of whiskey, his leg bouncing under the table with enough kinetic energy to power a small city. He stood when I approached, but his movements were jerky, uncoordinated. He kissed my cheek, and his skin was clammy. You look beautiful, he said, the compliment sliding off his tongue like grease. Sit. I ordered a bottle of the 1982 Petrus. It is breathing. A $5,000 bottle of wine. He was celebrating a victory he had not yet won. with money he did not technically have. "That is extravagant," I said, taking my seat. "I thought we were being liquid to cover the loan interest." "We are fine," he waved a hand dismissively. "Once the papers are signed tonight, the liquidity issue is resolved. The bridge loan clears tomorrow morning." He poured the wine himself. Ignoring the sommelier who hovered nearby, his hand shook. A single drop of dark red liquid splashed onto the pristine white tablecloth. He stared at it for a second too long, rubbing at it with his thumb, smearing it into a bruise-colored stain. "So," he said, topping up his own glass almost to the brim. "Big day tomorrow." "Huge," I agreed. "Are you ready?" "Born ready," he said, taking a massive gulp of wine. It was a waste of a vintage that demanded to be sipped, but Julian needed the alcohol, not the notes of blackberry and truffle. "But before we get lost in the celebration, I have a little housekeeping, boring stuff, compliance." He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. He placed them on the table, pushing aside the delicate centerpiece of edible moss and nitrogen-frozen flowers. "What is this?" I asked, picking up the top page. It was dense with legalese. "Insurance forms," he said quickly. "For the Oregon project, and some updated beneficiary riders for the trust. Since we are moving such a large volume of assets, the insurers require updated signatures, standard liability protection." I flipped through the pages. It was a masterclass in obfuscation. Buried beneath paragraphs of indemnity clauses were the transfer orders. These were not insurance forms. They were irrevocable deeds of gift, transferring the entirety of my family trust and the deed to the penthouse to an entity called Aurora Holdings, LLC. Aurora, the Roman goddess of dawn, a new beginning for him and Silesia. "It looks complicated," I said, frowning. "Should I send this to Marcus to review? He handles all my legal oversight." Julian flinched. "No," he said, too loud. Heads turned at nearby tables. He lowered his voice, leaning in, his eyes frantic. "No time for that. Faith, the bridge loan expires at 8 in the morning. If these aren't signed and filed by midnight tonight, the deal collapses. We lose the Oregon opportunity. We lose the deposit." "I see," I said. "So it is urgent." "Critical," he said. He pulled a Mont Blanc pen from his pocket and uncapped it. He offered it to me like a weapon. "Just sign by the yellow tabs. I have marked them all." I took the pen. It felt heavy in my hand. Julian watched me. He stopped breathing. His eyes were fixed on the tip of the pen. Hungry, desperate. He was so close. Just a few scribbles of ink and he would be free. He would have the money to pay off the cartel. The money to disappear to France. The money to erase me. I lowered the pen to the paper. "Here," I asked, pointing to the line. "Yes," he breathed. "Right there." I hovered the pen. I let my hand tremble slightly. "Julian," I said, looking up at him, "do you love me?" The question caught him off guard. He blinked, the mask slipping for a fraction of a second to reveal the annoyance underneath. "Of course I love you." "Faith, why would you ask that now?" "Because," I said softly, "this feels like goodbye." "It is not goodbye." He laughed, a brittle, nervous sound. "It is a new chapter. Just sign, baby, please." I looked back down at the paper. I moved the pen toward the signature line. Then, with a clumsy jerk of my elbow, I knocked my full glass of Petrus over. It happened in slow motion. The crystal goblet tipped. The dark red liquid surged out like a tidal wave. It washed over the tablecloth. It splashed onto Julian's cuff, and it soaked the documents. The wine saturated the paper instantly. The ink on the printed pages began to bleed. The signature lines turned into a soggy, crimson mess. "Oh my God," I cried, dropping the pen and jumping up. "I am so clumsy, Julian. I am so sorry." For a moment, there was silence. Julian stared at the ruined papers. He stared at the $5,000 of wine dripping onto the floor. He stared at his escape route. now dissolving into red pulp. Then, he exploded. "You stupid bitch!" He slammed his hands on the table, sending silverware clattering. The entire restaurant went dead silent. The molecular gastronomy stopped. The whispers ceased. Every eye in the room turned to us. "Look what you did," he screamed, his face turning a shade of purple that matched the wine. "Do you have any idea what those were? Do you have any brain in that pretty little head at all?" He grabbed the sodden papers, trying to shake the liquid off, but they tore in his hands, wet confetti. "Julian," I said, my voice trembling with fake shock. "It was an accident. We can just print them again." "We can't print them again," he roared. "The notary is gone. The filing deadline is in 2 hours. You ruined it. You ruin everything." He was losing it. The stress of the cartel, the lies, the pressure of the launch, it all boiled over. He forgot where he was. He forgot who he was supposed to be. A waiter rushed over, towel in hand. "Sir, please, lower your voice." "Get away from me." Julian shoved the waiter. Actual physical contact. I stood there, calm amidst the storm I had created. I looked at him. Really looked at him. This was the man I had married. A man who, when things didn't go his way, resorted to violence and insults. The charm was just paint over rot. "Julian," I said. My voice was low, but it carried. He stopped panting and looked at me, wild-eyed. "Paper and ink can spoil," I said, gesturing to the red mess on the table. "But the truth doesn't dissolve in wine. It stains, forever." He froze. The words hit him. He looked at my face, my dry eyes, my steady hands. He realized, in that split second, that the spill wasn't an accident. He looked around the room. He saw the diners holding up their phones, recording him. He saw the maitre d' signaling for security. He realized he had just destroyed his public image 12 hours before his biggest launch. "You," he whispered, "you did this on purpose. Go home, Julian," I said coldly. "You have a big day tomorrow." He stared at me with pure hatred. Then, he grabbed his briefcase, shoving the wet, ruined papers inside. He didn't say another word. He turned and stormed out of the restaurant, leaving a trail of red wine drops on the floor like footprints from a crime scene. I sat back down. The maitre d' approached, looking apologetic. "Madame, are you all right? Should we call the police?" "No," I said, smoothing my napkin on my lap. "He is just stressed. Work pressure." "The bill," the maitre d' hesitated. "Bring it to me," I said. The bill was astronomical. $6,400. I pulled out a credit card. Not my card. Julian's corporate American Express. The black card. The one strictly reserved for business expenses. The one monitored by the company's internal audit team, and now, thanks to Silesia's cooperation, flagged directly to the IRS for potential embezzlement tracking. "Put it on this," I said, "and add a 20% tip." I signed the receipt with a flourish. The transaction went through. Somewhere in a server farm, a red flag went up, personal expense on corporate account. Vendor fine dining. Amount excessive. I walked out of the restaurant into the cool night air. I didn't go home. I checked into a hotel down the street. I wasn't going to be there when Julian arrived at the penthouse, because Julian wasn't going to be able to get into the penthouse while we were at dinner. A very specific legal process had concluded. 2 weeks ago, I had discovered something interesting about our building. The developer was looking to offload the master lease for the penthouses to free up capital. Using the money I had moved to the shell company, my mother's maiden name entity, and leveraging a bridge loan from Marcus's firm, I had purchased the unit. Technically, I was the landlord. And technically, Julian's name was not on the lease, only mine was. He was an occupant at will. At 10 o'clock that night, while Julian was screaming at me in the restaurant, a courier had delivered a formal eviction notice to the concierge desk. Along with a change of locks, order authorized by the new owner, I tracked Julian's movements on my phone. He arrived at the building at 11:15. He went up in the elevator. I imagined the scene. He would be exhausted, furious, smelling of wine and desperation. He would try his key card. Red light? He would try the keypad code. Access denied. He would bang on the door. No answer. Then he would see his suitcases. I had packed them myself earlier that day. 3 Louis Vuitton trunks, stacked neatly in the hallway. I hadn't packed everything, just his clothes, his toiletries, and the framed photo of us from our wedding day, glass cracked. I watched the dot on the GPS linger in the hallway for 10 minutes. Then it moved back to the elevator, then down to the lobby. My phone rang. Julian. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, and again. I sent a single text message. The locks have been changed. The lease is in my name. The concierge has been instructed to call the police if you cause a disturbance. Good luck with the launch. I watched the dot move to the garage. He sat in his car for a long time. Maybe he was crying. Maybe he was screaming. Maybe he was calling Silesia, who I knew wasn't answering him either. Finally, the dot moved. He drove toward the office. Of course, it was the only place he had left. The Ethelgard Tower, his fortress, his sanctuary. He would sleep on the leather couch in his office. He would shower in the executive gym. He would put on a fresh suit in the morning and try to pretend his life wasn't imploding. But he didn't know that the office was no longer safe. He didn't know that while he was sleeping on that couch, the server room 3 floors below was humming with the new data file I had uploaded. He didn't know that the vision of tomorrow he was going to present was actually a record of yesterday. I lay in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. I felt a strange sense of calm. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. There was only the cold, mechanical precision of the endgame. I thought about the wine spilling on the table, the way it spread, staining everything it touched. Julian had spent 4 years spilling lies into our marriage. He thought they would dry up, disappear. He didn't understand that lies, like red wine, leave a mark that you can never truly scrub out. You just have to throw the tablecloth away. Tomorrow, I would burn the whole table. I closed my eyes and finally, for the first time in months, I slept without dreaming. The auditorium inside the Ethelgard Dynamics Tower was vibrating with the kind of energy usually reserved for religious revivals or rock concerts. 2,000 people sat in the plush velvet seats, their faces illuminated by the soft blue glow of the massive LED screen that spanned the entire back wall of the stage. The air smelled of expensive cologne, ozone, and the distinct metallic scent of greed. I stood in the shadows of the VIP box, looking down at the stage. I smoothed the lapel of my scarlet suit. My hands were perfectly steady. Beside me, Silesia sat like a statue carved from ice. She had not moved since the lights went down. She was watching the man who had promised her the world, knowing she was about to watch his world burn. "It is time," I whispered. Silesia nodded once, a barely perceptible dip of her chin. She pulled out her phone and sent a single character text to Henderson in the control booth. On stage, Julian was in his element. He strode across the black floorboards with the confident, predatory grace of a panther. He wore a navy suit that fit him like a second skin, his hair perfectly coiffed, his smile dazzling enough to blind the front row. You would never know that 12 hours ago he was screaming in a restaurant, covered in red wine. You would never know he had slept on an office sofa. He was a creature of pure facade. "We are not just building houses," Julian's voice boomed through the surround sound system, rich and resonant. "We are building ecosystems. Skyline Dreams is not a development. It is a philosophy. It is a promise that technology and nature can coexist in perfect harmony." He paused for effect. The audience leaned in. A few people clapped. He held up a hand, silencing them with a benevolent smile. "For 5 years, I have worked in the shadows to bring this vision to light," he continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I have sacrificed. I have bled. I have fought to ensure that every investor in this room is part of a legacy that will outlive us all. And today, I want to show you the heart of that legacy. I want to show you the future." He turned toward the massive screen behind him and raised a small remote control. "Ladies and gentlemen," he shouted, his arms spreading wide, "I give you Skyline Dreams." He pressed the button. The orchestral music swelled to a crescendo. The lights dimmed to black. The massive screen flickered to life, but instead of the sweeping drone-shot footage of a futuristic eco-city, the screen went stark white. Then, a single line of black text appeared in the center. It was a text message bubble, green, iOS format. Subject, The Leech, from Julian, to Silesia. She is so stupid it hurts. I had her sign the transfer authorization while she was drinking wine. She thinks it is for a tax shelter. God, I can't wait to dump her and get to Paris. A ripple of confusion went through the audience. A few nervous chuckles broke out. People thought it was a skit, an avant-garde intro. Julian froze. His back was to the audience, so they couldn't see his face, but I could. I saw his shoulders stiffen. I saw his head snap up toward the control booth. He pressed the clicker again, hard. The slide changed. Another text message, from Julian, to Silesia, date October 3rd, 2025. Vargas is breathing down my neck. I need to move the trust money now. If we don't pay the loan by the launch, they will break my legs. Just fudge the numbers on the quarterly report. These investors are sheep. We just need to fleece them one last time. The laughter died instantly. A heavy, suffocating silence descended on the room. 2,000 people held their breath. Julian was hammering the remote button now, his thumbs striking the plastic with frantic, rhythmic clicks. "Stop," he yelled, his voice cracking. It echoed horribly in the silent room. "Cut the feed. Henderson, cut the feed." But the feed did not cut. It accelerated. The screen split into 4 quadrants. Top left, a series of bank statements showing transfers of $500,000, $800,000, $1.2 million, all moving from the Treadwell Family Trust to Aurora Holdings Cayman. Top right, a high-resolution photo of a forged loan document, the signature of Silesia Vance clearly shaky and mismatched. Bottom left, the blueprints of the Skyline Dreams Community Center. Bottom right, a video file. The audio crackled over the speakers. It was unmistakable. It was Julian's voice, recorded in our kitchen just days ago. "I did it to protect you. The market was crashing. I had to move it fast. The money is safe. It is just borrowed, temporarily." Then my voice, calm and cold. "Borrowed. You borrowed $8 million of my inheritance for what? Julian. For Ethelgard. To cover the margin calls, the lenders were going to break my legs. Faith." The audience erupted. It wasn't applause. It was a low, angry roar that started in the back and rolled forward like a tsunami. Chairs scraped against the floor. People stood up, pointing, shouting. Julian spun around to face the crowd. His face was paper white, his eyes wide and wild. He looked small. He looked like a child caught standing over a broken vase. This is a hack," he screamed into his headset microphone. "This is a deep fake. Competitors are trying to sabotage the launch. Security cut the power. The power stays on. Julian," a voice rang out. It was my voice, but it wasn't a recording. I stepped out of the shadows of the side entrance near the stage. I held a wireless microphone in my hand. I walked up the stairs to the stage, my red heels clicking loudly on the wood. The spotlight operator, confused or perhaps realizing exactly where the drama was, swung the beam away from Julian and onto me. I stood there in my scarlet suit, glowing like a flame in the darkness. "Who is that?" someone in the front row whispered. "That is his wife." Someone else answered. Julian stared at me. He backed away, his hands trembling. "Faith," he choked out. "What are you doing? Get off the stage." "No," I said, my voice calm, professional, amplified to every corner of the room. "I think I will stay. You wanted to talk about transparency. Julian, you wanted to show them the heart of the legacy. So let's show them." I pointed the remote I had brought with me, a master override Henderson had programmed at the screen. The image changed to a split screen. On the left was the official Skyline Dreams architectural rendering. On the right was a hand-drawn sketch, dated 3 years prior, signed Faith Treadwell. The project you are investing in, I addressed the audience, ignoring Julian completely. The revolutionary ecosystem. It does not belong to Ethelgard Dynamics. It was designed on a drafting table in my home office on a rainy Sunday in 2023. It was a concept for a non-profit housing initiative. My husband stole the files, rebranded them, and sold them to you as a billion-dollar idea. Liar, Julian screamed. He lunged toward me. She is lying. She is mentally unstable. She is off her medication. He was fast, fueled by adrenaline and ruin. He closed the distance between us in a second. His hand raised as if to strike me, to silence me, to crush the truth back into the box. The front row gasped, but he never reached me. Two men in dark suits, who had been standing quietly by the curtain, stepped forward with terrifying speed. They were private security contractors I had hired using the funds from the Patek Philippe watch. One of them caught Julian's arm in midair. The other swept his legs. Julian hit the floor with a heavy thud. The microphone flew from his ear, skittering across the stage with a high-pitched screech of feedback. He scrambled to get up, his hair disheveled, his dignity shattered. "Let go of me!" he shrieked. "Do you know who I am? I am the CEO. I own this building." "Actually," I said, looking down at him. "You don't?" I pressed the button on my remote. The screen changed one last time. It displayed a property deed. Owner Faith Treadwell. Date of purchase November 2nd, 2025. "I own the building," I said, "and I own the intellectual property, and as of this morning, I have frozen the assets of the shell company you used to launder the stolen funds." Julian stared at the screen. His mouth worked, but no sound came out. He looked at the deed. He looked at me, and finally, the arrogance broke. The facade crumbled into dust. He wasn't a titan of industry. He was just a con man who had run out of road. "Why?" he whispered, his voice barely audible without the mic. "Why did you do it this way?" "Because," I said, leaning down so only he could hear me. "I wanted to surprise you at the office." The double doors at the back of the auditorium burst open with a crash that shook the walls. "Federal agents," a voice boomed. "Nobody move." 12 agents and FBI windbreakers poured into the room. Guns drawn but lowered, they moved down the aisles with practiced efficiency. Agent Miller was in the lead. He walked up the stairs onto the stage. He didn't look at me. He looked straight at Julian, who was still on his knees, held down by my security team. "Julian Thorne," Agent Miller said, pulling a pair of metal handcuffs from his belt. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit embezzlement." The audience was on its feet. Phones were out. Flashbulbs erupted like a strobe light storm. This was the content they craved. The fall of an idol. Julian didn't fight as the agents pulled his arms behind his back. The click of the handcuffs locking was the loudest sound in the world. It was a final period at the end of a very long, very bad sentence. They hauled him to his feet. He looked dazed. He looked at the audience. Then he looked at the wings where Silesia was standing. She stepped out into the light. She wasn't smiling. She looked sad, but resolved. "Silesia," Julian croaked. "Help me. Call the lawyers." Silesia shook her head slowly. "I can't. Julian, I am the witness." The betrayal hit him harder than the handcuffs. His knees buckled, and the agents had to hold him up. Then, he looked at me. His eyes were wet. He looked like the man I had loved 4 years ago. The man who had charmed me in a coffee shop. The man who had promised to take care of me. "Faith," he pleaded. "Faith, please, don't let them take me. I can fix this. We can fix this. I love you." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had bought a villa for another woman with my grandfather's money. The man who had planned to frame me for a federal crime. The man who had called me a leech in a text message. I felt nothing. No anger, no triumph, no sadness. Just a profound, quiet emptiness where my marriage used to be. I raised the microphone to my lips one last time. "The launch is canceled," I said to the room. "Please exit through the rear doors. The authorities will need to take statements. I clicked the microphone off and dropped it on the floor. It made a hollow thud. I turned my back on Julian. "Faith," he screamed. "Faith, look at me." I walked toward the side exit. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. I walked with the steady, measured pace of a woman who had nowhere to be but her own future. I heard the agents reading him his rights. "You have the right to remain silent." I heard the scuffle of feet as they dragged him away. I heard the chaotic noise of the crowd. But I kept walking. I walked past Silesia, who gave me a small, terrified nod. I walked past Henderson, who was frantically wiping the server logs. I walked out of the auditorium and into the long glass hallway of the building I now owned. I stopped at the floor-to-ceiling window. Outside, the Chicago skyline was gleaming in the midday sun. It was beautiful. It was solid. It was real. I took a deep breath. The air in the hallway was cool and clean. It was over. The play was finished. The curtain had fallen, and for the first time in 4 years, I was the only one left on stage. The fall of an empire is usually loud, but the dismantling of a life is surprisingly quiet. In the weeks following the arrest at the Ethelgard Tower, the noise of the media vans and the flashbulbs faded, replaced by the hushed, sterile hum of federal courtrooms and attorney offices. Julian Thorne, the man who had stood on a stage and promised the world a new future, was denied bail. The judge, a stern woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, looked at the evidence: the 3 passports, the ticket to a non-extradition country, the stash of cash at the private hangar, and declared him a flight risk of the highest order. There would be no penthouse arrest for Julian, no ankle monitor and house arrest in luxury. He was remanded to the Metropolitan Correctional Center, a triangular concrete fortress in downtown Chicago, where the windows are slits and the view of the city is a taunt rather than a privilege. The charges were a laundry list of white-collar devastation: wire fraud, bank fraud, money laundering, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit embezzlement. The federal prosecutors did not need to work hard. I had given them the playbook, the players, and the final score. Silesia Vance was the first domino to officially fall, but she fell in a direction that saved her from being crushed completely. True to our unspoken agreement, she testified. She sat in a deposition room for 3 days straight, unraveling the complex web of shell companies and offshore accounts she had helped Julian build. She admitted to her part in the deception, painting herself as a manipulated subordinate under the thrall of a charismatic sociopath. It was a performance, certainly, but it was one grounded in enough truth to work. The prosecutors cut her a deal. In exchange for her testimony against Julian and the information leading to the seizure of the cartel-linked assets, she received a suspended sentence and probation. I saw her one last time before she left Chicago. We met briefly in the lobby of the federal building. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, stripped of the couture armor she used to wear. She looked younger, softer, and incredibly tired. "I am going back to Ohio," she told me, clutching a one-way bus ticket. "My sister lives there. I am going to wait tables, or maybe work in a library. Something quiet." "Quiet is good," I said. She hesitated, looking at me with a mixture of guilt and respect. "He would have destroyed us both. You know, if you hadn't walked onto that stage." "I know," I replied. "You saved my life. Faith," she said softly. "I hated you for it at first, but you did. Good luck." "Silesia," I said. I didn't offer forgiveness. I didn't offer friendship. We were soldiers from the same war who had fought on different sides until the final battle. We didn't need to be pen pals. We just needed to survive. She walked out of the revolving doors and vanished into the anonymity of the city. I never saw her again. My own battle was far from over. The legal dismantling of my marriage was a surgical procedure performed by Marcus Steele. We recovered what we could. The trust had taken a hit. Julian had managed to burn through nearly $2 million in operating costs before I froze the accounts, but the bulk of my inheritance was safe. The penthouse, however, had to go. I stood in the center of that massive living room one last time after the forensic accountants had finished cataloging the assets. It was empty now. The Italian furniture was gone. The art was gone. The white rug I had scrubbed coffee out of was gone. It was just a glass box in the sky. Cold and echoing, I felt no nostalgia. I looked at the spot where Julian used to stand and drink his scotch, looking out at the lake, plotting his escape. I realized I had never really lived here. I had just been a guest in his ego. I sold it to a hedge fund manager from New York for $3.2 million. It was a fair price. I took that money, combined it with what remained of the trust, and did the one thing Julian never thought I was capable of. I invested in myself. I leased a raw industrial space in the West Loop, exposed brick, high timber ceilings, massive windows that let in honest, unfiltered light. I hired a small team of 3 junior architects and a structural engineer. I hung a modest sign on the door, Treadwell Designs. There was no dynamics in the name, no global, no future, just my name, just my work. 6 months after the arrest, I received a notice from the Department of Corrections. Julian had requested a visitor. His lawyer had petitioned multiple times, claiming it was regarding urgent family matters. I had ignored them all, but this time, I accepted. I needed to see him, not to gloat, not to yell. I needed to see him to confirm that the ghost that had haunted my house was truly gone. The visitation room was cold and smelled of floor wax and despair. I sat on a metal stool behind a thick pane of plexiglass. When the guard brought him in, I almost didn't recognize him. The Julian Thorne I knew was a man of tailored suits and manicures. This man was gaunt. His hair, once perfectly styled, was growing out gray and patchy. His skin was sallow, the result of months without sunlight. He wore an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He sat down and picked up the phone receiver. His hands were shaking. I picked up mine. "Faith," he said. His voice was raspy, stripped of its golden resonance. "You came." "I came," I said. My voice was steady. It didn't waver. It didn't break. I didn't think you would," he stammered. He looked at me through the glass, his eyes searching my face for a trace of the woman who used to bake him cookies. "You look different." "I am different," I said. "I am free." He flinched. "Faith, listen to me. It is a nightmare in here. You have to help me. The lawyer says if you write a character letter, if you tell the judge that I was a good husband, that I was under pressure, it could knock 5 years off the sentence. Please." I watched him beg. It was pathetic. It was horrifying. This was the man who had called me stupid in a text message. This was the man who had planned to leave me destitute. "A good husband," I repeated, my tone conversational. "A good husband doesn't buy a villa in France for his mistress with his wife's inheritance. Julian, a good husband doesn't frame his wife for money laundering." "I was never going to frame you," he lied, the desperation leaking from his pores. "That was just talk. I was panicked. I loved you." "Faith, I did, in my own way." "Your way involves felonies," I said. "I prefer a different way." "I can pay you back," he pleaded, leaning forward, his breath fogging the glass. "I have money hidden, accounts they didn't find, crypto. I can give you the keys. Just help me get out of here. We can start over, anywhere you want." He was still trying to play the game. He was sitting in a cage, facing 20 years in federal prison, and he was still trying to con me. "There is no money, Julian," I said. "Silesia gave them everything, the crypto wallets, the offshore shells. The IRS has it all. You are broke." The hope died in his eyes. It was like watching a light bulb burn out. He slumped back in his chair, defeated. "Why?" he whispered. "Why did you have to destroy it all? We had a good life. You were happy." "I was asleep," I corrected him. "There is a difference." I looked at the clock on the wall. My 10 minutes were up. "I have to go," I said. "I have a site inspection at 2. "Faith, wait." He slammed his hand against the glass. The guard took a step forward. "Don't leave me here. I am nobody in here. Do you understand? I am nobody. I stood up. I looked at him one last time. I didn't feel the anger I expected. I didn't feel the satisfaction of revenge. I just felt a profound sense of closure. He was a small man who had cast a large shadow, and now the sun was overhead, and the shadow was gone. You wanted a secret life, Julian, I said into the receiver. You spent 4 years building layers of lies so no one would know who you really were. Well, you got your wish. You are a number now. You are a file in a cabinet. No one out here is talking about you. No one is waiting for your next launch. You have achieved total anonymity. I hung up the phone. Faith. I could hear him screaming through the glass, muted and distant. Faith. I turned my back and walked to the heavy steel door. I waited for the buzzer. Click. I walked out of the prison and into the bright, blinding sunlight of a Chicago afternoon. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like gasoline and exhaust and hot pavement. But to me, it tasted like oxygen. I walked to my car. I reached into my purse and pulled out the one thing I had kept, the wedding band. I hadn't worn it in months, but I had kept it in my wallet, a heavy little circle of platinum that symbolized 4 years of my life. I looked at it. It was scratched. It was just metal. It wasn't a sacred object. It was a receipt for a bad transaction. There was a blue recycling bin on the corner, filled with empty soda cans and newspapers. I didn't make a ceremony of it. I didn't kiss it goodbye. I just dropped it in. It made a small clink as it hit a glass bottle. I got into my car. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I picked it up. It was a number I didn't recognize. "This is Faith," I answered. "Ms. Treadwell?" a deep voice asked. "This is Robert Sterling, no relation to your ex-husband's aliases. I assure you," I smiled. "How can I help you, Mr. Sterling?" "I was at the launch," he said. "The eventful one. I represent the Urban Renewal Group. We are planning a massive redevelopment of the South Side waterfront, sustainable housing, community centers, green spaces. We were going to hire a big firm from New York." He paused. "But then I saw you on that stage," he continued. "I saw your original designs, and I saw how you handled a crisis. We don't want the New York firm. We want the woman who designed the Skyline Dreams before it was stolen. We want Treadwell Designs." My heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the real launch. "That sounds like a project I would be interested in," I said, my voice professional, confident. "When can you meet?" "I am heading to a site right now," I said, "but I can meet you tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. "Perfect. We will see you then." I hung up the phone. I started the engine and drove toward the West Loop. I parked in front of my building. The construction crew was already there, renovating the facade of my new studio. The sound of jackhammers and saws filled the air. To anyone else, it was noise. To me, it was music. I got out of the car. I reached into the back seat and grabbed my hard hat. It was white, pristine, with Treadwell Designs printed on the front in bold, black letters. I put it on. I walked onto the site. The foreman, a burly man named Mike, waved at me. "Hey, boss," he shouted over the noise. "We found some rot in the support beams in the back. What do you want to do?" I walked over to him. I looked at the beams. I looked at the problem. "We tear them out," I said, my voice strong. "We rip them out and we replace them with steel. We build it stronger this time." "You got it," Mike grinned. I stood there, surrounded by dust and debris, watching the old structure come down so the new one could rise. I looked toward the horizon, where the skyscrapers of Chicago pierced the blue sky. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a survivor. I was an architect, and I had a lot of work to do. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal and redemption. It has been a journey, and I'm so glad you were here to witness the rise of Faith Treadwell. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a busy city like Chicago, or somewhere quiet and peaceful? Drop your location in the comments below. Let's see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed seeing Julian get exactly what he deserved, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Scarlet Revenge Stories. Hit that like button to support the channel, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people who need a reminder that the truth always comes out. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your standards high.